Why, thank you for that wonderful introduction, President Morad. It is a great honor for me to stand before you and be one of the first to congratulate you, the class of 2023. It is especially gratifying because my youngest granddaughter, Haley Savannah Rose, is a member of this class. The world has come a long way from where I was when I came here in 1962. I applied only to the University of Georgia because my older brother was at Purdue and my father informed me he didn't have enough money to send both of us to Purdue and I would have to find someplace else, and I found the University of Georgia. And I told him I was going to apply, and Dad said, well, you can go ahead, but they won't accept you because only the year before had they, under court order, admitted Hamilton Holmes and Charlene Hunter Gault, and of course, Mary Frances Early came in a little bit later. Well, in those days, they asked for a race on the application, a picture as if they didn't know your color if you went to Booker T. Washington High in Atlanta, and a personal interview. And so I had just turned 16 years old and just had gotten a driver's license. So my father drove us here to Athens, where my interview was with the person who had interviewed Hamilton and said that he was not qualified, even though you know he came here in chemistry and pre-med, never made a grade, under an A, and graduated Phi Beta Kappa. So we walked into his office. He didn't shake our hands. He didn't ask us to sit down. And he said, why do you want to come here? Because we don't want you here. And I said, that's why I want to come here. Well, the interview went down from there, and he actually used the N-word. I had never seen my father mad, except at me. And he was infuriated. He grabbed me, and we went out of the room, got in the car, driving back to Atlanta, and he said, that didn't go very well. What's plan B? Well, imagine our shock and surprise when a month later, we received a letter with red and black borders that said, congratulations, your official admission to the University of Georgia. So, when we arrived on campus and I was to go into Reed Hall, the university had said in the desegregation suit that even if we were qualified, they couldn't accept us because they could not guarantee our safety on this campus. And so when we went into Reed Hall and my mother saw that one bed in Reed Hall, she asked the house mother, is he the only colored boy who's going to be in here? That's how they talked in those days. House mother said, yes, ma'am. We go back to the car. My mother is crying. She says, get in this car. You're not going back in there. And I looked at my father and he said, if you get in the car, I will go borrow the money to send you to Purdue. And I said, my stuff is in there. Mother said, we will buy you new stuff. Get in this car. And I said, well, look, I'm here now. Let me go. And if it doesn't work out, I will transfer. And so I walked into Reed Hall completely, totally alone. Now, my father had said, you're not going to have any friends because to be your friend, they will have to give up theirs. They will be cursed. They will be called all sorts of names. They will be harassed. and your friendship is not worth that. We had a dorm meeting, and it was the back of the bus days. You see, I never talked to a white person until I came here. That's how segregated the world was. And it was back of the bus days. We walked into the auditorium. I wasn't going to sit in the back of the room, so I went down the aisle and I sat down. Everyone on that row got up and left. The three boys sitting directly in front of me turned around, and one of them said, "Are you a freshman?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I didn't know there were any Negroes in this class." I said, "There's at least one." And they said, "Can we come sit with you?" And as we walked out, they were joined by two of their friends. We went back to my room. We talked all night. I'd never talked to a white person. They had never talked to a black person on their own peer level because all of the schools were segregated. As long as we were here, they were among my closest friends. Living in Reed Hall was an adventure. It was a challenge. My windows were broken out so often, the window crew came by every morning to see if they would have to replace the window panes. Lighter fluid was squirted into my door at least 3 times and set on fire. We had slats on the door. They dropped firecrackers down at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Someone said, "What did you do when they dropped the firecrackers down?" I said, "I went back to sleep." They said, "Well, what did you do when they were breaking out your window panes?" I said, "I moved my bed and went back to sleep." I had a bathroom next door to my room. It was my private bath, even though it had 4 urinals in it, because I was the only person that used it. And so I go in one morning. They had taken soap and written obscenities all over the mirrors, taken the taps off of the faucets in the sinks and in the showers and left the water running, and taken toilet paper and stuffed it down each one of the commodes. So I went down the hall to their bathroom. And I walked in, I ran through all the showers, I washed my hands in each one of the sinks, and I sat on every commode. And then I tried to use every urinal. And I said, "You mess with my bathroom, I'll be back." They never touched it again. When I came here, Hamilton Holmes sat me down and said, "Harold, this is not the usual college experience, so go slow." I didn't. When I came out of Washington High, I had 5 band scholarships, so I tried out for the Dixie Redcoat Marching Band. The band director acknowledged my talent and said, "But you can't be in my band." As a matter of fact, Dr. Blackwell Diallo, whose name is on the dormitory, came here as a music major, and she was also not allowed to be in the Dixie Redcoat Marching Band. But I was the only one of us who went to all of the home football games and to the basketball games. And at the first football game, I may have been the only black person walking into the stadium that didn't have a mop or a broom. I sat in the student section. After the national anthem, the band played Dixie. And by the way, the football games looked like a Ku Klux Klan rally with all the Confederate flags. The band plays Dixie, I sit down. All of this debris and curses rain down on me, imploring me to stand. I didn't stand. But a few seconds later, everything got quiet. And I looked behind, and there was Dean Tate grabbing ID cards. And to get your card back, you had to go to his office. And Dean Tate was the only administrator that even pretended that he didn't mind us being here, giving us his phone numbers and saying, "You have trouble on this campus, anytime you call me." Second football game, band plays Dixie, I sit down. All of this comes down and immediately stops because there's Dean Tate. The third football game, I walked into the stadium, he walked in behind me. I could sit in peace. And we didn't have that difficulty anytime going forward. And I must admit that my friends, including, by the way, one of my dearest friends who I met my second quarter here, who is actually here today, Lynn Fagan Wright. My friends sat down with me and they did not stand either. But this place was a challenge. The first time I went into the bookstore to buy a book, the young lady said, "Show me an ID." And I refused to do so because she didn't ask anybody else for an ID. I called Dean Tate. He talked to them. I bought my books. The first time I went swimming in the University of Georgia swimming pool, they kicked everybody out and drained the pool. I went back the next day. They did exactly the same thing. I called Dean Tate. From the manager's office, Dean Tate, if you know his reputation, he was a large, imposing man. And he said, "Let me talk to the SOB." And you know what that stands for. I was able to go swimming. No one sat in a class with me my first year on the same row. Most professors, but not all, welcome me in their class. Now, people ask me, "Aren't you bitter?" Me? No. Well, maybe a little bit because of the band, because I would have looked good in that red jacket. But no, I wasn't bitter at all. It was an adventure. When I came here, my parents said, "Focus on your objectives and shut out all the noise. Work hard, find your limits, and then go find someone to help you get past them." That was good advice then. It's good advice now. I ask you to take that to heart. And did I transfer? No. As a matter of fact, at the end of my freshman year, I got a letter inviting me into the honors program. My parents took that letter, framed it, and hung it on the wall. Years later, and by the way, I never told my parents what was going on here. They would say, "How's the university?" I said, "It's fine." And it wasn't until they read Calvin Trillin's An Education in Georgia, which I recommend to everyone, that they found out what was happening here. My mother said, "Why didn't you tell us?" And I said, well, first, I wouldn't have gotten any sympathy from my dad. And secondly, I would have worried you to death. And I know I made the right decision because the day I sat at my graduation, my mother said, "I can now get a good night's sleep." So the university has come a long way, and I am proud of this university, not because of just what it's done with regards to race relations, but because this has become one of the very best universities in this country. And by the way, it was not that when I was here. Because Calvin Trillin, who had an Ivy League education, looked at Hamilton, looked at Charlene, looked at Mary Frances, Kerry, Rushin, Miller, me, Mary Blackwell, Diallo, and Alice Henderson, all of whom were strong students, and he said, "Why did you come here when you could have gone to a really top flight school?" And I remember I told him, I think I was 17 at the time, I told him, I said, "I was born in Georgia. I was raised in Georgia, and this is the University of Georgia. That's why I'm here." What this university has done has prepared you. Now, prepared for what? There is a lot of information out there. And this university has taught you to take that, assimilate it, process it, synthesize it, and reach more rational decisions. But because you do that, because you're not intellectually lazy, don't think that you have discovered the truth. Because as any empiricist will tell you, the same data set can yield conflicting results. So what to do? Here's what I do. I tell people, this is my conclusion. Prove me wrong. And if you do, I will adopt your opinion. So don't be dogmatic. Use the tools that you have acquired here, because they're invaluable. You see, look, the world is made up of three types of people. There's the 2% that make things happen, the 8% who know what's happening, and the 90% who haven't a clue as to what's happening. The university has given you the tools to move out of the 90% and into the 8%. And one of my personal disappointments as a faculty member was to see how many of our students were actually intellectually lazy and would be mired in the 90%. I know that doesn't apply to any of you. So, you get to the 8%, but if you want to get to the 2%, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of skill, and it takes some luck. Remember, Thomas Edison said that success is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. So work hard. You're soon to be graduates of this university and to join the proud alumni of this wonderful place. Alma mater means foster mother. Alumni means foster children. So look around. Look at your brothers. Look at your sisters. And understand me when I say, I don't care what you look like. I don't care if you're black or white, brown, yellow, red, or shades in between. What I care about is your character. I care about your desire to be better. I care about your desire to make others better. I care about your humanity. So when you leave here as part of my family, go out there, go work hard, go make us proud, and go Dogs.
Thank you, Dr. Black. That rarely happens at a commencement ceremony. Your words have been most insightful to these graduates as they step out to meet the challenges that lie ahead. Thank you for being with us today.